Well, first of all, welcome everyone for the third term of the classes on Uma. I prefer the word Uma because it's short. The Sanskrit is so long, Madhyamika. But actually, of course, the study of Madhyamika or middle way. Hopefully most of you are in the group, so you've received the material. If any of you sent me a message while I was in Germany, my phone broke down at some point and I lost a lot of the contact. So if I never responded, it was simply because, well, I didn't know you wrote to me. So anyway, continuing with the third term, we'll go through the summary, not word by word, you can read it on your own, but explain a little bit just as a refresher for those who were already here last time, and then for those who are new, just to get a sense of what we've been talking about. And the good thing is that everything that follows, even if you haven't really studied in details, it's still okay because new subjects are covered, and so it's not going to be too difficult to follow the class or the classes. But just a few things. I have some prayers. I prepared some prayers which I forgot to put in the group. So today I'll just do refuge and bodhicitta, keep it short. But before we start, it may be appropriate to say a few things before we start with the actual class. So one thing before I forget, someone posted in the group, could we get the audio files earlier? And one of the organizers, I forget who it was, said like, well, we didn't get it done so far, but we try harder. Well, to be honest, it was me who didn't get it done. It was none of the others. It was me. It was like, oh God, I need to upload them. I need some more time. So that was a good message to get. I'll try and upload it now every time after class. I could really do that. I'm just lazy. So I could do it, I would only do it once a week, but it's true for those who follow the audio files. It's running, right? Yes. No, it's not on yet. Okay. All right. I think twice. We need to press one more, I think.
I think so. Okay, yes.
Yep, now it's working. Great. Okay, so anyway, for those who listen to the audio files, they can do now from now on, unless I forget, but do it right away. So I'll make a point getting those online as well. That's the first part about the online files. And of course, you all know that the recordings, the video recordings will be available, I think a few minutes after classes have finished. Then it takes a moment to upload them. The program does it on its own, but it takes a moment. So everything will be online. Trying to think, and of course, as you know, and it's a little uncomfortable for me to say it, but still I should do so, that we've asked for a small donation for the IBD. They've never asked for anything, but they very kindly made these rooms available. The director of this institute, the current director, Geshe Somdin Gyatso, has been so supportive and in every way. I mean, whatever I requested, he's been so accommodating, he's been extremely kind. He even said, use the main prayer hall today, see how many people come, you don't need to go to the classroom, whenever you want, you can do. So he's been extremely helpful. And the students, of course, can't use this room while we are in it. But even more important than that is that the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics has been offering philosophy classes for free for anyone. I mean, Tibetans, monastics from the Himalayas, lay people from the Himalayas, Westerners, whoever is interested can join their programs, and they never take any fees. So I myself had the great fortune to study at this institute, and every little thing that I have understood comes from their incredible kindness, the teachers and everyone. So just a small way of giving something back. That's why I decided on that fee. Okay, so that's it about the fee part, and you've already seen you could do it directly, like give it like in cash, for instance. Your name is noted down. You can get a receipt if you want. If you want your name to be mentioned, we give a list at the end to be transparent to the IBD who's given. If you like to be anonymous, then it'll just be noted anonymous, for instance, so they can see who's made offerings, but you don't need to give your name, as I said. You can also do it via PayPal. There's a name, it's a papal in my name, but since I don't use papal, it's only used for exactly this. So again, it's transparent. Thea, one of the organizers, she can see what comes in, and again, it helps us to, unless you want to be anonymous, please mention the purpose, and then it's clear. And also, Leon, you've got another way, the UPI, through UPI, somehow. Whatever that really means. I know kind of roughly what it means, but not how you pay. Anyway, so UPI is the third option. Okay. So that's about that. And yeah, I guess we could start then with a short prayer, just taking refuge and bodhicitta. If you have the prayer, you could join. If not, I mean, more important than the prayer, of course, is our own motivation. I just had the great fortune to translate for Kyabje Ling Rinpoche while he was teaching in Germany, so I did it online from here. And Rinpoche gave such a beautiful explanation on why the motivation is important, and it becomes Dharma if it's the right kind of motivation. I cannot even repeat what Rinpoche said, but it was so inspiring. So like, yeah, the motivation, come on, there's two things important, as the Kadampa masters say. Two things are important when we do anything to do with the Dharma, listening to teachings, practicing. It's the motivation and the dedication. And so then Rinpoche continued to talk about like how important the motivation is. You turn it into Dharma, it should just be for the benefit of others, just for others, just for others. That's it. So basically the thought, may whatever I do here in this room today, listening, reflecting, questioning, being critical, may all of that become a cause for me to become fully enlightened. So for the benefit of all sentient beings, in that once I'm fully enlightened, I can really truly help others in the most effective way. Not only do I actualize my fullest potential, the greatest mental state we can all achieve, we will have the potential to achieve, but on top of that, we can achieve it, and it's the greatest that can be achieved. So what is more meaningful? And secondly, and if not more importantly, we can benefit all other sentient beings by showing them how to do it. We've gone there ourselves, we can help others to do the same. So to free themselves from all problems and hindrances and limitations, what is more meaningful than that? So that should be our motivations, for others, for others, for others. That's pretty much what Rinpoche stressed. Okay, so with that in mind, I'd like to just lead the prayer in English. I'll say it 3 times. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay, the translation here is a little unusual, as you've noticed. Well, first of all, I've mentioned merit and wisdom. I'll tell you why. Because in Tibetan, for many, many centuries, the wording has been by accumulating, so by the accumulation of merit through generosity and so on. And then His Holiness a few years ago said, well, it shouldn't just be the accumulation of merit. What about wisdom? We've got 2 accumulations. We accumulate merit and we accumulate wisdom. So then His Holiness changed it by the accumulation through generosity and so on. But in English, by the accumulation, in Tibetan it works well. In Tibetan it works. Yes. But in English, in Tibetan it works fine. It makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, in English it sounds weird. So I added by accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections. So I didn't say by the practice of, because it doesn't say that in Tibetan. So anyway, so it may be unusual. The only advantage is that we pay usually more attention when it's different. You know, when a prayer we say again and again and again, at some point it's like we think about breakfast or whatever, because we've said it so many times we don't need to think. But when there's a new translation that maybe even irritates us, like, why would they put it that way? Anyway, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, so when there's a translation that is different, we may actually pay more attention. So if there's any advantage of having it this way. Yeah, so this is what I've prepared. There are a few other prayers which we don't need to do now. Okay, great. Does anyone know where Katya is? Katya? Has anyone heard from Katya? No? Katya and her husband. Never mind. Okay, never mind. Yeah, Kate, not Kate. Katya. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, never mind. Pardon? Oma, that's right. Yeah, Oma. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyway, so let's start. Having recited the prayer, having generated a positive motivation, let's then look at the summary of the 2 terms. Okay, I'll just quickly. All right. Okay, so in terms of what we've done so far, we started in autumn 2025. What do we follow? Acharya Chandakirti's Entering the Middle Way. Now, you'll find in the material, it says Acharya Chandakirti the whole time. I'm trying to kind of not mention him too often because it's kind of difficult, but I follow my kind teacher, Geshe Dorje Damdul, who has said on a few occasions, he's not your classmate. So don't call him Chandakirti, he's not your classmate. You don't call, like in Tibetan, they always say Lobun or Gyaltsen, so the great Bodhisattva, the Acharya, right? And it's so like Lama Tsongkhapa, like Jetsu or Je or Lama, but in English we drop all those, kind of too long, we're busy. And in some writings it's terrible, like when his holiness, when is a writing about his holiness the Dalai Lama, sometimes they just say Gyatso. It's so odd, you know, his holiness the 14th Dalai Lama dancing Gyatso, and at some point it's just Gyatso. That is, no one calls his holiness that. So anyway, I prefer to do it the way my kind teacher has advised, and yeah, I've had a bit of a hard time sometimes, but you'll notice, and if I've forgotten it, then please point it out, because sometimes I just forgot, because it's still stuck in my mind to just use the first name, or just say Chandakirti. Okay, so anyway, we're studying Acharya Chandakirti's Middle Way, Entering the Middle Way, as well as Lama Tsongkhapa's Illuminating the Intent. Now, what's so special about these 2 texts is not only were they studied and practiced in India for, well, more than 1,000 years, I mean, a really long time in Nalanda University and so forth, but once the Dharma went to Tibet, at least Acharya Chandakirti's Entering the Middle Way has been studied far and wide. I mean, in so many different places, and we know the Tibetan great masters of the past. I mean, incredible. We're so fortunate to have their biographies, their writings, their explanations. Even nowadays, we have these great realized masters, Kyabche Ling Rinpoche being one of them. So many beautiful stories about Rinpoche's kindness and how he touches people. So why are they who they are now, these realized masters? Because they have an understanding, they've realized emptiness, have definitely an understanding of emptiness, maybe directly experienced it or experience it, whatever it is, based on the writing of Acharya Chandakirti, they came to that understanding, whether directly or indirectly. So this is the door, the entry to understanding emptiness. And that's what we all want, right? And of course, bodhicitta and great compassion are explained together in union, which is again what makes this text so special. I say again because I said it a lot last time. Yeah, so that's what we're studying. And of course, as part of the Gelug tradition, you have Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary called Illuminating the Intent, which has been so beautifully translated by Geshe Thupten Jimpa. But the text is difficult. Even with his really good English and very accurate translation, I read it and I go, let me read the Tibetan. I'm more familiar with the Tibetan. Not that the Tibetan is that easy, but we studied it in so much detail. So the English, I'm like, what? So it takes a long time. So that's why I decided to put this handout together, kind of explain it. Hopefully I didn't confuse, or I'm not confusing you anymore with more explanation. So let's see. But these are the two main texts we study. And again, illuminating the intent, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, has in the Gelug tradition been the main text up to now. So in the three great monasteries, Ganden, Sera, and Drupal, it has been studied for many, many centuries. And most importantly, resulted in these great masters with great realizations. Think of all the lamas in the Gelug tradition. Well, their realizations came from those texts. So they're so precious. There's such, I don't want to use the word blessing, but there's so much in them, right? Just the fact that they brought forth these incredible masters. So there's some hope for us. Yeah. Anyway, so the text starts basically with paying homage to great compassion. Great compassion, compassion. So misunderstood in the West. Terribly misunderstood in the West. What is compassion? It's a state of mind, very important, it becomes clear here. It's not smiling and agreeing with everyone. Oh, I'm more compassionate because I just let them do whatever they want so they're happy. No, it's a state of mind, a mental state that may express itself also in strength, in sometimes wrathful activity. Like a parent, don't do this, don't run on the road, don't light that fire, kind of forcefully pulling them back for their own benefit. Now, very important, it doesn't turn you into a doormat or a punching bag. I'm so compassionate, just steal from me, let them use me. It's nothing of that. That's what people think when they hear compassionate. Oh, you can't be compassionate with someone who starts a war, right? No, it's about understanding that that person is harming themselves so greatly and so many others. How terrible. Would I want to be that person? Do I want to be this terrible person who causes the suffering of so many sentient beings? Oh my God, no. The poor person, the poor man or woman. Plenty have started wars, so I can't even say guy. No, men and women, all right. So many have done that. Oh gosh, I don't want to be them. So compassion doesn't mean you allow for that to happen. In fact, you would stop it. You would give, if you can, do your best to stop it, for them to stop harming themselves and of course harming others. So it goes along with wisdom, very important. A second aspect of compassion that's often misunderstood is that people say, compassion, there's so much suffering, I hate all that suffering, I don't want to see it, and it just depresses me. And if I have to generate depression, if I have to generate compassion, I have to even think about suffering more. I see it already, it's right in my face, and now I have to even think about it? No, thank you very much. I mean, life is, difficult as it is. I want to see the beautiful things in life and not see suffering. It's going to depress me. But then we have to understand depression, again I say it. Compassion is a type of mind that is very courageous, very determined, that has that enthusiastic effort that goes along with this enthusiastic effort. I have this opportunity to do something. Right now, I have all the freedoms, all the opportunities to actually transform my mind and to help myself and help others. What an opportunity. And based on that, that's also something I'm basically saying what Kyabchen Rinpoche said. I'm so inspired by what he said. So it's like, wow, you have all these chances. How are you going to waste that? This meaningful opportunity. Don't think next life it's going to be like, oh yeah, this life I'm just going to enjoy. I've got a precious human birth. I'll just have another one next time, and then I start practicing. Because, to cite Rinpoche, we start in the morning. We start with envy, greed, and aversion. So how much chances do we really have if we don't do something with the opportunity we have in this life? How do we expect to have precious human rebirth in the next life? Unless, again, we utilize it. So based on that, then, wow, but I have this opportunity, others don't. And they're just like me. Everyone is just like, we all want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. So we're all the same in that way, basically. So I could do something for others, right? So think of a doctor. A doctor. Somehow you want to become a doctor, or this super psychologist, not to make a lot of money and become famous, but you can really help people. You have this talent, right? You discover this talent and you're really good at medicine or psychology, whatever, right? And you've got a taste of it. So you utilize it. I don't know, maybe you have a chance at school to do, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. So it's like, wow, I can do something. It's really inspirational, isn't it? Because it's in the nature of our mind. Actually, we want to help others, right? When someone falls over on this street, usually we reach and try to help them. Unless we're busy with then we may just, the self is somehow involved, then we want to help. But when the self is not involved, there's compassion there, right? So we have that natural tendency to want to help, and see yourself in that situation. You want to become a doctor, for instance. So then you have to learn about the different diseases. You're not going to be like, oh, life is so depressing. I know you can get a cold and you can get a headache, and now I have to learn about leukemia. No doctor's going to get depressed about that, right? And then more patients come to the hospital. Oh, life sucks. Go, everyone go home, right? That would be ridiculous. The opposite. Like, I don't know, there are these movies, I don't know how realistic they are, Emergency Room or whatever, where they're like, oh, there's a patient, and they all start rushing and they're doing their thing and stuff. So maybe they're fake and these doctors just fall into a depression the next moment, but I don't think so. That's their life. They love doing it. Psychiatrists, psychologists, what have you, they thrive. So similarly, we hear about the suffering of sentient beings. We know there's a way out. That's what we learn in the Dharma. We learn about how to do it. And there's like, oh, more. I need it, right? It inspires us. So forget about depression. The opposite. It gives us more strength. It's invigorating. It gives us more energy. It's not the kind of energy that you generate when I can now retaliate. I can finally get that person to really suffer. That may be a few moments, but then it's exhausting, right? Holding a grudge and wanting to take revenge. It gives you there's some kind of energy it gives you, but it doesn't last. It's very exhausting. That's just the energy of aversion and anger. While compassion, if practiced in the right way, and that's why we learn this, is invigorating. When his holiness was younger, okay, now his holiness, of course, manifests old age, and so he's no longer doing what he used to do, but still he's doing a lot. When you think of all the audiences his holiness, I mean, if I had 100 people walking up to me with full of emotions, I'd probably exhausted after 10 minutes. But of course, his holiness for hours, sometimes every day, sees hundreds and hundreds of people. But in the past, of course, his holiness was traveling, and his schedule was so busy, and he had all the energy in the world. His assistants, they took shifts, couldn't keep up with his holiness. All this energy from what? Compassion. So we don't have to worry about the lack of energy. Once we're really motivated just for others, then it just comes natural. The moment self-centeredness comes in, that's what exhausts us. The thing that is really exhausting is self-centeredness. So exhausting, right? 8 hours at night may sometimes not be enough. And then when you look at the lamas, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, of course, Khyentse Lama Zopa Rinpoche is a very good example. He didn't have to sleep. He didn't. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, you can't fake that, teaching a whole night and then going on and on and on. You really can't fake it. So he didn't have to sleep. Yeah, well, no self-centeredness that exhausts you. Okay, anyway, having said all this about compassion, here the text starts with paying homage to compassion and at the same time explaining it. And of course, it also teaches us the different stages all the way up to enlightenment, but we're starting with the beginning of these stages, which is great compassion. Second term. I've got the second term. was wondering why I went right away into the second. Where is it? Summary. Excuse me. What happened? Right now I know. Yes, here it is. So, okay, it starts with compassion. All right. But actually, because I looked at the second already, and I started with compassion. Okay. Anyway, never mind. Whatever I said before, it still stands. But basically, so this text, entering the middle way, you can read about it yourself. It consists of 330 verses. It's divided into 10 or 11, actually 11 chapters, and guides us through the Bodhisattva path, but again, starting with great compassion. So the very motivating force needed for the Bodhisattva path. But not only is this text, not only is entering the middle way based on, of course, the teachings of the Buddha, but also very important, it is based on Arya Nagarjuna's teachings. So we refer to Arya Nagarjuna again and again. I guess everyone who studied Uma or the middle way has heard the name Arya Nagarjuna. So he composed this text called Fundamental Wisdom. It's an amazing text. It's so amazing, but really, really difficult. It is so difficult that it still hasn't made it into the, at least in the Gelug tradition, into the official curriculum of study. Now, you can study the text. Many of them study, many monks and nuns, monastics, or lay students of the Dharma study it on their own, but it's not part of the curriculum because it's so difficult. But if you study entering the middle way, you understand it's kind of like a key almost, like a key that unlocks that treasure box of the fundamental wisdom. And what is so precious about the fundamental wisdom is it's like a meditation guide. You know, each chapter deals with a particular topic. So cause and effect, for instance, that's one topic. Then what is how do cause and effect exist? What is the nature of coming and going? What is the nature of coming into existence, remaining for some time and going out of existence? Or what's the nature of the aggregates of samsara and so forth? So every topic is discussed. And then all these reasonings are put forth. And if you really take that text and meditate on it, that would be best, to meditate on emptiness. But of course, we should do this first learning about emptiness. And then that way, Acharya Chandrakirti's text is helpful to understand what emptiness is all about in conjunction with method, love, compassion, and so forth. And then utilize the fundamental wisdom and hopefully meditate on it. And of course, it's available in English, so no excuses. All right. Okay. And so entering the middle way, the reason it is called such one reason is that the author enters into the middle way. The author, Acharya Chandrakirti, he enters into the middle way as the author, and we should enter into the middle way as the students. So there are two types of entry, what we should do and what the author should do. So the author enters into the middle way by explaining the fundamental wisdom. The middle way here, the word middle way, when we say entering into the middle way actually refers to Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. So Acharya Chandrakirti enters into the fundamental wisdom, in other words, he explains it by supplementing it, by adding things to it, by, first of all, when it comes to the method side, talk about the 6 perfections, compassion, and so forth, going into detail on that. And from the point of view of the wisdom side, although the fundamental wisdom, which is kind of the basis of emptiness, the basic text on emptiness, besides the Buddha's teachings themselves. So besides explaining, so along with explaining it, it also clarifies things. It describes, it delineates the Prasangika school clearer from all the other schools. So kind of saying, okay, the other schools say this. Okay, yes, so this is what they say, but they're not negating enough. They're accepting too much here. So we need to negate a little further. Not too much, not too little. So really that middle of emptiness just being, negate a particular characteristic, objective, intrinsic existence, but don't negate everything. And in order to show that, also teaches dependent arising very extensively. Again, you don't have that extensive explanation in Arya Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. It explains very clearly that phenomena are merely labeled, for instance. What does that mean? They're just labeled. They exist nominally. Acharya Chandrakirti does a wonderful job explaining that to some degree, or in some detail. So all this is supplemented to give us some more information that makes it even easier to understand Arya Nagarjuna's text. And of course, understanding Arya Nagarjuna's text, we come to understand the sutras. It seems like we're starting the wrong way. Kind of like, first we look at Lama Tsongkhapa, some Tibetan guy. Some great, amazing master, of course, to be more colloquial. But an amazing master. But it's like, why do we start with Lama Tsongkhapa? We're following basically his commentary to understand Arya Chandrakirti, to understand Arya Nagarjuna, to understand the Buddha. Why don't we start with the Buddha and then leave the rest? No, because it's really difficult to understand. It's as simple as that. That was 2,600 years ago. The teaching style has changed. Form is empty, emptiness is form. What does that even mean? To quote the Heart Sutra, for instance, which is one of the most well-known perfectional wisdom sutras. Of course, we now know what it means, but because we have all these explanations. And they're usually referred to as a key that opens, right? They say the golden key, the silver key. So these different ways are decodifiers. Is that a good word? That decodifies what the Buddha actually said, what Arya Nagarjuna said, what Acharya Chandrakirti said, right? So you have Lama Tsongkhapa leading us through, of course, Acharya Chandrakirti's text, and in that way we learn about all the other texts. So eventually, when you've studied this text, you then go to the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras and you understand them. Right now you sit down and you're like, what? Right? So a lot of the great practitioners now, for instance, Geshe Thupten Peltsang, a very good example. He's an amazing practitioner, lives nearby, practices, meditates nearby. He's one of the greatest examples of a contemporary student and practitioner of the Dharma. After he completed his studies, he started reading the sutras. Now he understood them. Right? He fully understood them and is a great expert on the different sutras. So we kind of start the other way around, but only because otherwise it's too difficult to understand them. Okay. Anyway, so Acharya Chandrakirti, of course, supplemented the teachings, added some more information that makes it easier for us, and we should enter the middle way by relying on this particular text. Okay. So, Lama Tsongkhapa's text, to say a little bit about his text, beautiful work, not easy to read. I found it quite difficult, but I mean, as a non-Tibetan anyway, but I think also some of my classmates struggled with it because the Tibetan is kind of archaic. It's old style Tibetan, long sentences. And I think the difficulty of it is reflected well in the English. You can get a sense of like, let me read that again, and so forth. But he did an amazing job by following, first of all, Acharya Chandrakirti's self-commentary, also very important, or auto-commentary, which is done a lot actually. First, a master such as Acharya Chandrakirti composes a text in verse, but then at some point, maybe their disciples have questions and so forth, decide to compose in prose. Is that the right word? In prose. Decide to write an auto-commentary, explain their own work. I mean, who better to do that than the author himself or herself? So in this case, Lama Tsongkhapa followed exactly that author commentary that explains a lot of verses which may be difficult. So that's integrated into the text, word for word sometimes. But it's really difficult with the English translation to actually find the exact word. So that would be a challenging task to actually point out. But yes, it's in there. If you read the Tibetan, you recognize it right away. If you read the author commentary and Chandrakirti and Lama Tsongkhapa's text, you'll recognize it. But he also followed a very important Indian commentary, the most, I guess, popular Indian commentary on Acharya Chandrakirti's and Entering the Middle Way was from someone called Acharya Jayananda. So he's quoted quite a bit in between, sometimes just to refute him. But that's totally fine in this tradition. You refute each other. You learn from each other. You discuss, you debate. And I said in the very beginning that your motivation, everything you do, when you, for instance, hear motivation being very important, when you question everything you hear. That's a very important attitude, to question. So, and then there's this exchange, of course, Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes refuting Acharya Jayananda's explanation. And Lama Tsongkhapa also followed the 2 Tibetan translations. Okay, in English we have a lot of translations of a lot of texts. I'm pretty sure they had them as well. They had more than just these 2 that we know of, but they probably disappeared at some point, right? I mean, it'll probably be like that in English as well. At some point, an older translation, if people are happy with it, then that is going to be printed, and the other ones will slowly disappear, right? I think it's fine. It's good to have a lot of translations. I've prepared a lot of translations when I had to translate, because that was always the best preparation for me. But other people don't use it. Never mind. I was well prepared to translate. So it disappears. Never mind. I learned something and I was able to translate to the best of my ability, better than if I had learned another translation, right? If I study the root text and another translation, I have to study 2 texts, because sometimes the words are different. They're expressed differently. So to prepare your own translation is a great exercise. But it'll disappear. One day it'll be gone. Who cares? There's going to be a really good one that continues on. So this, I suppose it was like that in Tibet as well, maybe. There was more than just 2, but we know of 2. One by Natso Lotsawa, and the final one that is really survived until now, or that is most widely used, is by Patsap Lotsawa. Based on Natso Lotsawa, he improved it, he reviewed the text and produced this final version. So, but Lama Tsongkhapa used both, and compared the 2 translations. So that's actually really nice. And what's very important, he uses this topical outlines, which Indian texts in Sanskrit did not use. It didn't have these topical outlines, like outlines and then with a heading, right? They had a particular way of connecting 2 topics. They would always do that, right? Not just jump, but connect the topics in a gentle way. But they didn't have this system of like headings, outlines, headings, and so forth. And when you first see all these different headings, you go, oh, they give me a headache, those headings. Seriously, I mean, it feels like, whoa, so many headings, so many. But when you become familiar with them and you memorize them, these headings, that of course are part of certain outlines, allow you to have a clear picture of the entire text in your mind. So it's really helpful. It's almost like a map. Like, you want to go someplace and you have like a rough idea of the different countries from the different capitals and the main cities and so forth. It gives you a clear picture, like, oh, okay, this is where I'm going, even though you don't have all the details. Similarly, if you have to memorize the outlines, and we always had to do that. Well, had to means like, if you didn't, you had a problem. So you do it for the debate, for instance. So yeah, you of course like, memorize, I hate it. But once you have it, it's suddenly like, tuk, 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 it's all there. That's why we do it. I mean, a lot of the memorization just helps to have it clearly in front of you and not having to look again and again, and you see how it's all related, how it all connects. So that's one of the greatest contributions by Lama Tsongkhapa. He kind of introduced that. I don't know whether he was the only one, but he's very much credited for having done so. Maybe there have been others before him, I suppose so. But in this tradition, yeah, oftentimes this is mentioned. All right. And so the text basically starts with an homage to the from the translator. So the text actually, you have the title, Entering the Middle Way, you've heard about that. Then there's the homage by the translators, Patsatla Tsaba, for instance, paying homage to Manjushri. Very appropriate because, he's the Buddha of wisdom, and it's mainly about wisdom. So yeah, it starts with that. And then, of course, the text, the author starts to talk, like the author himself, Acharya Chandakirti, is now starting the text by paying homage. We don't do that nowadays, right? We don't start a book with like, I pay homage. We start with the biography of ourselves. Not necessarily, but oftentimes we say something about ourselves. No, I mean, this definitely shows a great degree of humility. How the authors start, like, it's not like, oh, I'm so amazing, I'm going to write this. No, it's about those great beings, right? They've inspired me. Everything I've learned is because of what they've done. And let's face it, if the Buddha hadn't come and no other Buddha had come, we wouldn't be sitting here. Simple as that, right? And of course, from the Buddha's teachings, all these other masters, living masters and so forth, we wouldn't be here. We'd just be immersed in good old samsara, no way out, right? So paying homage, this sense of gratitude. And we all know how good it feels to have this gratitude. It's true humility, right? It's realistic. There's so much I can be grateful for. And what am I grateful for? Or why am I grateful? Well, because they've taught this incredible Dharma, so you pay homage. And usually it's lamas, it's the Buddha, of course, it's the Dharma, it's other, but here's great compassion. That's unusual, quite unusual. I don't think, unless they kind of emulated Acharya Chandakirti, I don't think there's any other text that starts with that. So that was really unusual, is really unusual still. Paying homage to great compassion, that's okay. To be grateful to that state of mind that others have developed, and that I also want to develop. And at the same time, to learn, of course, about what great compassion is all about. Okay, so it comes at the very beginning. It covers 3.5 verses. Now, don't be surprised, we're going really slow. Oh, I forgot to say that. One thing about this course is it's slow. It's slow. Why? Because when I studied this, okay, we studied this in 3 years. That is faster, but we had classes every day. It was very, very intense, extremely intense. And we went into so many details. It was so wonderful. I've never felt rushed. In fact, I wanted it to go on forever. I felt like, oh, when the end was near, like, oh, I don't want to. It was so amazing. I learned so much. And then the debate, and I loved it. So now there are a lot of courses available for Westerners, and they're really important. Amazing. So many great programs now with online and everything. They're wonderful. And I can only recommend you to take them. Amazing. Please, so many wonderful programs. You study all the great texts and so forth. But they're fast. They're fast. And so I don't want to join them personally because I have to cut something. But what am I going to leave out? What am I going to leave out? So I'm thinking I'll just offer something alternatively for those. They're incredibly qualified, great programs that you could do to get a really good sense of what we study. And then if you have the interest and the time and want to take it slow, welcome. We can do it here, right? And with online now, it's so easy. So that's what I want to do. Just make sure you get a flavor, get a sense of the flavor I had the fortune to receive through my kind teachers. Yes, and I also want to use more debate. This time I included more debate. Because last time I had already some, but actually I spelled it out. I spelled out debates. One person, question, answer. So I have some examples of debates. I included them this time. Well, because so many people are studying debate, And I thought, well, you know, those who are not studying it, never mind, you learn it that way. And maybe it encourages you to start one of those programs. Because now it's a new thing and people are interested and it's coming more and more. So I included a lot more debates. Whatever debate I came across that I felt was helpful. So there's more material to come. And it slowed the whole thing down further. Never mind, you know. I'll be here until the last person leaves. So there's no one left. Okay, I'll pack up and maybe I'll get to the end, maybe not. Okay. But anyway, I forgot to mention that in the beginning. I do want to get through it, but still make sure I mention as much as possible. So the text starts 3.5 verses. And yes, one more thing. In the beginning, and this is not just my pace, this is traditional in Tibetan learning, you start very slow anyway. So the first few verses, I mean, when we studied the Abhisamaya Alamkara, how many years did we spend just on the homage, right? And then you speed up. Then it gets faster and faster and faster, right? Because you covered so much that the last verses, you already covered a lot of the content of those last verses, and you don't need to repeat it again and again. Yeah. Okay. So here, quite slow, the first 3.5 verses. It distinguishes, first of all, there's 3 types of great compassion, but first you start in general. What is great compassion? So here it tells us great compassion is the root of everything. Great compassion is the root of all Dharma. Seems surprising. Like, what about the fundamental vehicle? So I'm not going to call it Hinayana, I'm going to call it the foundational vehicle. The Theravada can be also called the Theravada. Although, sometimes when we say foundational vehicle, the Theravada is part of the foundational vehicle, but I'm not sure the foundational vehicle is necessarily the same as what we know as Theravada. Because the Theravada is what we know in the different countries now, but sometimes the Tibetan describe also a foundational vehicle which is slightly different. So maybe there were other traditions that are no longer around. The foundational vehicle tradition we still have around is described as Theravada, but then there may be others. Yeah, so I prefer to as foundational vehicle. We can discuss it further, but just for now, so foundational vehicle, okay. And then, of course, you have the 2 types of practitioners of the foundational vehicle. Shravakas, more social, more interactive. Solitary realizers, more on their own, more solitary. Okay, one of the main differences, usually and oftentimes mentioned, is that a Shravaka or a Hira, is someone who wants to become self-liberated, end of story. A solitary realizer, or Pratyeka Buddha, wants to become enlightened, but for their own benefit, which is actually not possible. So, okay, that's still great motivation, but in the end, they also become liberated. Because unfortunately, enlightenment is only possible if you do it for others. And if it's for their own benefit, which is not saying selfish, they're not selfish in any way. They're, already have a great degree of renunciation, which is not self-centered at all. However, it's not with the same kind of like, I'll take personal responsibility for others. That thought is just not there. And so they also become liberated. Okay. So these 2, they arise, these 2 practitioners, those 2 types, psychologically they're just different from their way of practicing, they're different. So they arise from Buddhas. If there wasn't a Buddha who taught the Dharma, there wouldn't be a Dharma to practice. Therefore, whether they met the Buddha or not, or the Buddha's they must have encountered the Buddha's teachings to then become hearers or solitary realizer, arhats, liberated beings. So, here it says, basically, the hearers and solitary realizers, they come from the Buddhas. Where do the Buddhas come from? They arise from bodhisattvas. Because they were bodhisattvas themselves, right? Just as you arise as an adult from you, the child who was in the 1st grade, right? You are the result of yourself as a toddler, as a kindergarten student, as a 1st grader, and so forth. Similarly, a Buddha is the result of being a bodhisattva before. They wouldn't have become a Buddha. And of other bodhisattvas that inspired them while they were bodhisattvas. So, Buddhas arise from bodhisattvas. Their own previous time of being a bodhisattva and other bodhisattvas that inspired them. And bodhisattvas, where do they come from? There are three main causes: great compassion, a conceptual understanding, an intellectual understanding of emptiness, and bodhicitta. And here bodhicitta is not actual bodhicitta, it's contrived bodhicitta. Contrived. Which means it's not the real deal yet. It's kind of like our bodhicitta. It's contrived. Right? I have to rethink. May I become enlightened for the benefit of all? You really, in that moment, you may actually feel it, but it requires some effort. It's not like it spontaneously pops up all the time. It's based on a very simple principle. Fake it until you make it. Buddhism is all about that. First you fake it. It's like, it's like, I don't have great compassion or anything of that sort, but when I generate the motivation, I pretend I do. I fake it. But the good thing is, and here modern science helps us, neuroplasticity and so forth, every time you generate that thought, certain neurons are activated and they're strengthened and new pathways, and every time it becomes easier and easier and easier, and at some point that pathway is so pronounced that it arises spontaneously. I mean, I gave you a ridiculous explanation of neuroscience. I have no idea what I'm saying. But from a Buddhist point of view, it's a bit like you start with this, you do it once, you do it twice, and it becomes much more natural and more natural. And at some point it becomes spontaneous. So you start with a fake version. Contrived is really just another way of saying fake. Contrive it until you make it. I mean, fake it until you make it. So you make it, that is the uncontrived version. And so the cause of a bodhisattva is that contrived bodhicitta, which is why it has to be explained. Although in the root text it talks about actual bodhicitta, but then the commentaries explain to us, oh, no. Actual bodhicitta is not the cause of a bodhisattva, because a cause must precede its effect. But someone who has bodhicitta, in that moment they are a bodhisattva. So bodhicitta does not precede a bodhisattva. But contrived bodhicitta, there's something there. No, it's that camera. I thought she was looking. Contrived bodhicitta is a cause of a bodhisattva. So, great compassion, cause of bodhisattva. Contrived bodhicitta, cause of a bodhisattva. And then you have the wisdom realizing emptiness. Is that a cause of a bodhisattva? In general, no. You don't have to realize emptiness to become a bodhisattva. Once you're a bodhisattva and you haven't realized it yet, you better get down to realizing it, because otherwise you won't be able to progress. But if you are a practitioner of greater mental capacity, as they call it, right? Someone who's intellectually really interested, who wants to understand what they're doing, this is recommended. And I think at this day and age, when most of us have received, all of us have received an education, and come on, it's not an easy education. Don't you think the Tibetans studying 20 years is like, you all did it. If you've gone to university, you study for 20 years, right? 4 years of kindergarten, elementary school, middle school if you're from the US, then you have high school, then you have university. Add it up, you probably get easily to like 20 years. So now, with that knowledge, I would say, we could say you're of greater mental capacity, of sharper mental capacity, because you have learned to learn easily, as opposed to maybe someone in India 2,500 years ago who became a monk at the age of 25 and had to learn how to read and write. Possible. For them, it may have been harder, right? Not being used since they were little. So now, I don't know whether we are of greater, I don't know. But in general, this text is directed at the main students of this particular text. Main students means those who use Acharya Chandrakirti's text mainly in order to realize emptiness. And those students, if they're able to realize emptiness on the basis of that, they're said to be of this sharper kind of capacity, and they should realize emptiness before entering the path. They should realize emptiness first. Because once you realize emptiness, you know that self-grasping is a crappy mind. No, I shouldn't say crappy. It's a totally unrealistic mind. It's not realistic. Right now, I don't know. I'm very convinced that everything exists inherently. You know, honestly, my day-to-day life is based on the belief that you exist inherently and you're inherently my friend or inherently my enemy or whatever. My life is governed by my view of phenomena existing inherently. And I have to constantly remind myself in order for things not to get worse. So I don't feel it. The thing is, once you do realize it, then it's like, of course. Then of course. I mean, enlightenment, of course it's possible. Right? Because self-centered attitude that is responsible for our other afflictions, that is responsible for our suffering, well, if phenomena lack inherent existence or intrinsic existence, then this other mind that suggests that phenomena exist intrinsically is a wrong mind. And as we all know, a wrong mind can be eliminated. If you understand the opposite, then that mind will, be able, you can eliminate that. If you understand, I give the same example again and again, there is no ghost underneath your bed, right? You may believe there's a ghost underneath your bed or a ghost in the closet, whatever. A thief in your building or a snake in the cupboard. You may believe that, and all your emotions are governed by that. And the simple opposite, the simple remedy is to look, no snake. Okay, there's no snake. What happens to your original wrong view? It's gone, because there is no snake. As simple as that. Then you will no longer believe in the presence of a snake. So similarly here, once you know there is no inherent existence and you fully internalize that, I'm saying fully, there's a certain way of doing that, we'll get into that more, then that mind will disappear. And if that mind disappears, then the other afflictions will disappear. And just knowing emptiness, you can understand that liberation and enlightenment is possible. So it's not taking it on faith. Yeah, my teacher told me so I want to reach that. I don't really know whether it's there, but I believe it's there. No, it's like, whoever tells you the opposite, they won't be able to convince you. Enlightenment is possible. And that gives you a different type of strength and determination that you wouldn't have unless you realize emptiness first. Does that make sense? So it's very much encouraged to realize emptiness first. Okay. Anyway, that's why these three are said to be the main causes of a bodhisattva. But of these three main causes, what are they? Great compassion, wisdom realizing emptiness, and it's just conceptual, and contrived bodhicitta. Those three. Great compassion, conceptual realization of emptiness, contrived bodhicitta. Great. Which of those is the main cause? Which of those is the main cause? Is it great compassion? Is it the wisdom conceptually realizing emptiness? Or is it contrived bodhicitta? Pardon? Great compassion, exactly. It's great compassion, that's the root. And so it's beautifully expressed here in verse 2, which says compassion. Basically, it doesn't say that it's the main cause, but it's implied that's the main one. It's important in the beginning, it's important in the middle, it's important at the end. Everything revolves around great compassion, right? In bodhicitta only works because of great compassion. Yeah? Bodhicitta is the wish to become fully enlightened, only because you wish to benefit other sentient beings. The main wish is to benefit all sentient beings. That is what great compassion is all about. And so you want to become enlightened with that in mind. That's the means to it's just a means to an end. The main goal is the benefit of all sentient beings. They compare that, and I've said that before, you want to drink water. That's your main goal. You're thirsty. You're by the way, yeah, I'm thirsty, that's right. So you're really thirsty. So why do you want for a water? Now you wish for a water, for a glass. You want to have a glass. You want to have water and you want to have a glass. What is your main goal to get? What is your main aim to get the water? The glass is just a means to an end, right? Glass, cup, whatever. So in the case of enlightenment, since that is the way to actually benefit others in the best way, That's why you wish for enlightenment. I said previously, and it's ridiculous, if becoming a crocodile would mean you can benefit all sentient beings best, then bodhicitta would mean the wish to become a crocodile. Right? It sounds ridiculous. But simply because it's not about, it's not the main aim. The main aim is not to become a Buddha. The main aim is to be of benefit, of the greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And to be able to achieve that, you need to become a Buddha. Of course, for yourself, that's the best state you can reach. So in that sense, it's also, of course, important that you achieve the highest, you actualize the fullest potential and all that, yes. But since there are more sentient beings outnumber us, so to a certain degree, they're actually more important. They outnumber us at least. And so we can benefit them in the greatest way, not just ourselves, but also them. Which is why great compassion is more important than bodhicitta even, in that sense. It's the driving force. So it's important in the beginning. And so once you generate great compassion, then you're able to generate bodhicitta. And once you do that, you enter the bodhisattva path. So what keeps you going? Great compassion. It's like the petrol in your car, right? Progressing on the path is like having that vehicle, the foundational vehicle, the practices of the foundational vehicle. Those are the practices. So what keeps you going? It sucks. It's boring. Who wants to sit and just focus on the breath for hours? Let's watch a movie. It's much more entertaining. No, it's great compassion. Keeps you going. A true practitioner of the universal vehicle, they don't want to, I mean, watching a movie is fine, or doing this, that, and the other is fine. But if there's great compassion, nah, I want to practice. So it keeps you going. It's like your petrol, your whatever, right? Keeps you going. And then at the very end, once you become enlightened, the greatest wisdom, the greatest omniscience of a Buddha without great compassion would not get the Buddha to benefit other sentient beings. So the great compassion of a Buddha is so amazing, the Buddha is constantly interested only in benefiting others. So it's important in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. And compared to, great compassion is compared to water. When you first plant a seed of your practice, it's like the water that gets the path, to develop in your continuum. And then it's like, first it's like the seed, First it's like planting the seed. It's like, get you going. Then it's like the water that gets the seed to grow on the path. And then it's like the harvest that can be utilized forever. Endless kind of harvest or fruits, as Geshe Thupten calls it here. Okay. And it's beautiful, and this text, this verse is quoted a lot, again and again. You hear the second verse, you hear it quoted when I talk about great compassion. Yeah, this is something to look out for. All right. So, what did we learn so far? Everything to do with the Dharma has its root in great compassion. That's what the first text tells us. The first and the second verses, they tell us the root of everything is great compassion. That everything comes down to great compassion, wisdom, realizing emptiness, and contrived bodhicitta. That's also the main cause of a Buddha, of course, and also the main cause is also of foundational practitioners. It becomes their cause as well. But of those, it's mainly great compassion. That is the main cause. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So enough of great compassion in general. Now let's look at the three different types. First is great compassion that takes sentient beings as its object. That's the first type. Great compassion that takes sentient beings as its object. Now, to be honest, the terminology is really confusing here. The names of the three types of compassion are quite confusing. Not just in English. Not just in English. In Tibetan, same confusion may arise. Now, the names seem to indicate the first type of great compassion takes sentient beings as its object, while the second and the third type don't. That's not true. They all take sentient beings as their object. Simply because, what is great compassion? How would you define great compassion? What I'm going to say now is not how it's defined in the text. The way it's defined in the text gives a lot of room or gives a lot of opportunity for debate. But this we don't need to debate. We discussed it in the first year. Those debates I'm not going to make part of the summary. So usually it's the debate. It's sentient beings to be free from suffering, right? So the focus is all sentient beings. Every great compassion focuses on all sentient beings and wishes them to be free from suffering. But first of all, what is meant with suffering? Wishes them to be free from headaches, wishes them to be free from lack of food. In other words, suffering of suffering, or more than that. So are you just wishing for them to be liberated? Or do you want a kind of great compassion that wishes to free sentient beings from all limitations, calling that suffering? Makes more sense, right? In order to then generate bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened, to lead others to that state, implied in that is actually your great compassion wishes for all sentient beings to reach that state, to be free from suffering, yes, anything that keeps us from being liberated, but also anything that keeps us from actualizing our fullest potential in the form of Buddhahood. So in a way, you could say, great compassion wishes for all sentient beings to be free from anything that should not be in their mind, that is not in the nature of their mind, which includes the obstructions to liberation and enlightenment. You can actually come to that conclusion. Otherwise, if you just say free from suffering, if you mean the 3 types of suffering, you're wishing for them to be liberated. Because once you've removed the 3 types of suffering, you are liberated. It shows you the debate, right? You could go right in there. What is the definition of great compassion? The wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. What does that suffering mean? Define it. The 3 types of suffering. So your great compassion wishes for all sentient beings to be liberated. No. Well then, you've got a problem. Think again. Okay, so you could therefore say for all sentient beings to be free from anything that is not in the nature of their mind, which obstructions to liberation and to enlightenment, whatever keeps our mind from being enlightened right now, right? That's the obstruction to liberation. It's not in the nature of our mind, because if it were, you could never become enlightened, right? It's in the nature of water to be wet. You can't have water that's not wet. Can't remove the wetness from water. It would no longer be water. So similarly, if the obstructions to enlightenment were in the nature of our mind, you could not become enlightened. You would destroy your mind at the same time as removing these obstructions. So therefore, it's not in the nature of the mind. Which is why great compassion, you could argue, is the wish. And here I'm just putting it out there, but logically, great compassion has to be the wish for all sentient beings to be free from any kind of limitation. And once you wish that, then you think, well, how can I help sentient beings to reach that state? To become enlightened first. That's why you want to become enlightened. Okay. A further argument could be, what about, okay, the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Leave aside the first debate I just gave you. What about foundational vehicle practitioners? Wouldn't they wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering? Right? Taking the 3 types of suffering, for instance. They may not wish for all sentient beings to become Buddhas, but they wish at least for all sentient beings to be free from the 3 types of suffering. But to say that's only something a bodhisattva can generate, because they say only a practitioner of the universal vehicle, or the Mahayana, the universal vehicle, generates great compassion. Hearers and solitary realizers don't. That's weird. Why wouldn't they not wish for all sentient beings to be at least free from the 3 types of suffering? Then sometimes they say they wish that for some sentient beings. Who do they leave out? My neighbor? Don't like that guy? No, they're these incredible practitioners with no self-centeredness. No way. Which is why some define great compassion, saying it is the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and a mind that wishes to take personal responsibility to bring this about. So to define great compassion, not just by that wish to for that sentient beings to be free, let's say, from the 3 types of suffering. Let's just say the 3 types of suffering, even using them, but saying, I want to bring this about. I take personal responsibility to bring this about. That is unique. That again takes you towards the universal vehicle. Whereas practitioners of the foundational vehicle, it's kind of considered not to be a possibility. They may think it's just not possible. Or I feel that's overwhelming. No, that's too much for me. Right now, for the time being, it's wonderful if some do it, because they do accept that there's some sentient beings who become Buddhas. Buddha Shakyamuni, for instance. But they feel, no, for me, that's just not an option. And of course, to think we are part of the universal vehicle, we have that attitude is ridiculous. I'm sure most practitioners, if not all practitioners of the true practitioners of the universal, of the fundamental vehicle, are much better practitioners than myself. So I'm kind of dabbling with this kind of great compassion thing, but it's a different matter actually practicing it. But theoretically, the idea is if you follow the practices of the universal vehicle, you generate great compassion, you generate the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Let's say even just the 3 types of suffering, with the wish to take personal responsibility yourself. So you're basically wishing to take all sentient beings to liberation. That's also okay, actually. Because a bodhisattva, all right, their motivation is actually to become enlightened but for the benefit of all sentient beings doesn't necessarily mean to take all sentient beings to enlightenment. You may also just think to take all sentient beings to self-liberation. Right? That's debatable. But usually it's understood to mean liberation and enlightenment. Yeah. So again, it's a debate. It's something you may debate. Usually it's actually included in that. Okay, never mind. I'll give you a taste of some of the discussions that could arise from that. The point is, therefore, great compassion focuses on all sentient beings, wants them to be free from any type of suffering, and wants to take personal responsibility doing so. Okay. But why do we not generate great compassion? Why it's so difficult? What is the reason we have such a hard time generating it? And that is explained in verse number 3, in the sense that explained in one way, but it also explains what we need to understand first. And what do we understand about our own predicament, but also about the predicament of other sentient beings? So, first of all, why is it so difficult to generate great compassion? Well, good old clinging to the self, good old self-centeredness. That's it. That's our problem. So, and then from that arise, of course, other afflictions, and that gives rise to all our suffering. So we're caught in an impossible situation. We have a type of wrong mind, wrong consciousness, which once we have that, you can't get around being self-centered. As long as you believe, as long as you have a mind that holds onto an unrealistic I, you cannot do anything to avoid having self-centeredness. You can reduce it, but you cannot totally eradicate it. So the actual root is that self-grasping. But not just we are in that situation, other sentient beings are as well. I mean, we at least know it's wrong. That is a huge step. If you'd ask someone else, like any of your friends or family members, if you were to ask them, you're looking at things that exist inherently. Do you think they exist that way? Explain to them what it means, and they go, of course. Right? If you talk to someone in Christianity, I remember once I talked to my cousin, she's very religious, she's very Christian, and she wanted to know about, she's interested in mindfulness and read about self. And when she asked me about it, I told her about it, and she was shocked. She was like, stop. There is a self, of course I tried to say there is a self, yeah, but what I said seemed to suggest there isn't. And so it didn't go down well with her. She didn't want to hear about it. So it was not something she could believe in. So most people, I guess, in this world believe that self exists in the way this root misconception suggests it does. Right? So very difficult. And if you think about it, it really is a cause for compassion. If we want to develop the first type of compassion, first of all, understand we are in this predicament. First is the thought, I am. I am, in the sense, I exist inherently, I exist intrinsically. So I then cling to that self, to that inherently existent self, right? And then I cling to what's mine. So basically, first there's the belief in an inherent I that is inherently, intrinsically different from all of you, like a total separation, intrinsically so, independently so. So there's me here against the rest of the world, and sorry to say it, but I'm just more important. Because I'm here with my own mind. Here's the self, it's here on this side, so my mind believes myself is more important because you're further away. Therefore, there's self-centeredness. What's mine is more important than what's yours. In particular, the most important that is mine, which is my happiness. That's more important. So I cling to the I and my happiness. That's self-centeredness, basically. Attachment to the self and to what is mine, especially my happiness. And based on that, all the other afflictions start. That gives rise to actions, volitional actions, motivated by the afflictions, which gives rise to suffering. And so we are like a bucket in a well, right? Going down is easy. Experiencing the results of negative actions, very easy. Pulling it up is really difficult, right? And as we're trying to get out of all the trouble, the bucket, is thrown against the walls of the well, and it gets dented, and we're exhausted finding this happiness, and it's so easy to fall down again. You can look at it from our own life, or from the point of view of many lives. Being reborn in the higher realms is much more difficult than, hell realm is easy. They're all easy to be reborn there. We may not believe in their existence for one simple reason. We can't see it. Let's face it. Any argument for the non-existence of the hell realms? Can't see it. That's it. And it sounds very Christian. I'm kind of moved away from that. Maybe. I don't know. But hellish kind of existence as well. There's so much we don't see. I don't know. 2,000 years ago, if you told people somewhere that there are viruses that could kill you, they would think, yeah, right. My neighbor can kill me, but not a little tiny thing I can't even see. So, no big deal that we don't believe in something because we can't see it. But without going into more details on that, it's really easy to suffer. It's easy to suffer. It's very difficult because of our self-centeredness, because of the causes we constantly accumulate. Even our Dharma practice is always influenced by self-centeredness. If we're a little bit more mindful, wow, self-centeredness finds a way to sneak in. It's so clever. Oh, I'm such a good practitioner. Can everyone see it? Right? It comes in there. So the point is, therefore, here it's really teaching how to look at our own life, the predicament we're in, this verse, but then based on that to think of others. Think of others. And that can really give rise to a sincere sense, I want to do something, I need to do something. I need to help sentient beings get rid of that root, because without it, self-centeredness is pre-programmed. Is that a good way of saying it? It's kind of like there's no other way around it. It's a given. That's why Dharma practice eventually, in the end, how long does the class go? Into 6, yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little confused today with all the different times. So, therefore, self-centeredness, self-grasping is what we need to remove. But based on the understanding, the wish to really do so needs to be based on the understanding of what it gives rise to and how terrible, the terrible things it gives rise to. The most horrible suffering you can think of comes exactly from that. Even just a slight discomfort comes from that. Yeah. So anyway, based on that verse, we can learn that. And the bucket, of course, you can go through the bucket. The 6 reasons why the bucket. Yeah, but it's kind of beautiful, the bucket. All right. And we should meditate on this. This is the point of That's the whole point of this verse. So illuminating the intent also makes an important point here. So I'm not going through everything that is in this particular kind of handout, different to once we start with the actual handout. There I go into a lot of details on what is discussed there. But here I want to mention something that Lama Tsongkhapa really stresses, is that in order for us to have great compassion, it's not enough to simply see how sentient beings suffer. He makes this beautiful point. So verse 3 beautifully illustrates the suffering of sentient beings, and that is important, based on ourselves, of course, first. First, we need to see how we suffer ourselves. First, we need to apply it to ourselves. Because if I don't want to be free from that, why would I wish it for someone else? It's a bit like if you, I don't know, suffer from migraines and you know how terrible it is, you have much more compassion for others if they suffer from the same. But if you never know what it's like, you never think about it, well, you don't have compassion. So the point is, therefore, before we can generate great compassion, it's important to generate renunciation. Understanding the drawbacks, understanding the disadvantages of samsara, the lack of freedom. I mean, we have no freedom. We're so into freedom, aren't we? And of course, compared to some other people, we definitely have a certain degree of freedom. But we can't choose our rebirth. We can't choose when we're going to die. We can't choose not to get old. We can't choose not to get sick. I mean, it's so unpredictable. It sucks. I mean, now with my parents being elderly, there's 2 people getting sick. And it really sucks. Gosh, it's so in my face whenever I go home. And both my parents were so sick. My mom is here with crutches because, I mean, she came here because she wanted to see the Tibetan doctor, but she's here with crutches. She can hardly walk. And it's like, oh, and this is what's in front of me, unless it kills me, or, you know, something kills me before I get to that point. So it's like, wow. And Rinpoche kind of said it, you can't see properly, you can't walk properly, and people humiliate you. I noticed people, when my mom talks to someone in a shop and I sit next to her, they no longer look at her. They look at me. So I have to turn away. I don't want them to talk to me. I don't want to know where the butter is. I don't care. You know, she asked for whatever, right? So I turn away so they look at my mom. I find that so humiliating. They don't believe she understands fully. So they talk to the person, they think, that's terrible. So Rinpoche said it, you get humiliated. Right? And my mom sometimes says, she didn't even look at me. So I constantly look away because it annoys me to bits. I don't want to say, look at her. I don't want to say that. So I force them. But it's humiliating. People no longer respect you. They look at you in a different way. So the point is, look at your own situation, just growing old, right? And everything else. Gain a sense that is samsara. Generate renunciation. The sincere wish, I want to overcome that. And then you can do it with others, right? But that's still not enough, because you will not want for others to be free from that unless you feel close to them. Right now, I'm closest to myself. So I want it for myself. I want it for myself easily. Once I understand, if I were to understand the drawbacks of samsara fully, I want to be free from that, right? We read about a disease, and you don't want to get it. When you read about COVID, I'm sure first you were like, just a little cold, who cares? But then when you read about it, you were like, I don't want to get COVID. So you wear a face mask, for instance, or maybe got vaccinated. Similar here, you fully understand it, you don't want it. But what about others? They can get corona. You know, it's kind of like this distance, which is ridiculous with COVID, for instance. They have it, you get it, kind of idea, right? So similarly here, we're so close to other sentient beings. In reality, their suffering affects us, but we don't see it that way. That's why we don't want them automatically to be free from suffering, from the drawbacks of samsara. So we need to generate closeness. And we can do so by equalizing, exchanging self with others, or understanding how sentient beings have been so close to us in the past. We've just forgotten. Yeah? So that's a very powerful, though it's usually described as a means to generating bodhicitta, But actually, before you can generate bodhicitta, you need to have closeness. You need to generate closeness towards sentient beings. And that is a very good way of doing so. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. So having said that, that's the first type of great compassion. It shows us basically, it's just great compassion in general. I'm saying it's what I've said about great compassion before. That is the first type. The other two types are different, not because great compassion is different, but what accompanies great compassion, right? You can have just great compassion arise in your mind. That would be the first type. Nothing else but great compassion arises in your mind. But with some training, two other minds could arise at the same time. And when these other two minds arise at the same time, they affect your great compassion. And that's why it's given a different name. It's called the second and the third type, right? Or as you will hear now what it's called. But anyway, to just wrap up the first type is not explained in any other way than explaining how to get there. By explaining how you can generate that great compassion, you understand it. You understand its causes, you understand what great compassion is all about. So that's implied. And as I just said, first you look at your own predicament, generate the wish to be free from that, then you look at others, generate a sense of closeness and want them to be free from it, and end up with great compassion. Okay. So, great compassion is great. But it should go along with an understanding of reality. So wisdom is important. Yeah, you need both. Wisdom without compassion is cold. Great compassion without wisdom can take you the wrong way, can lead you the wrong way. So it's important to have both. And that is indicated by the next verses. No, not the next verses, the next two lines. The first two lines of verse number 4. Okay, verse number 3 explained the first type. The first two lines, here A, B, I put A, B, first line, then second line, A, B, C, D, is there always 4 lines. So the first two lines of verse number 4, so 1 is the first chapter, 1.4 is the verse number, and then A, B is the lines, indicates the line, right? I'm sure it's pretty obvious, but anyway, that's usually how the verses are counted. So the first two lines of verse 4 are saying, beings are like reflections of the moon in rippling water, seeing them as fleeting and as devoid of intrinsic existence or intrinsic nature. Okay, so now we have two more types of great compassion. One is called great compassion that takes phenomenal reality as its object. Okay, never mind, just a long word. And the third type is called great compassion that takes no reference as its object. I said the wordings are confusing. I'll tell you what it is before, even without going through all the introduction. It's basically this. You first generate, of course, great compassion. The first type goes first. But you should not lose sight of wisdom. For instance, impermanence. Impermanence is so important. Impermanence is so important. Sometimes we get carried away, emptiness, and kind of neglect impermanence. First, before we know about emptiness, we're great fans of impermanence, I guess, right? It's kind of eye-opening. It makes perfect sense, but we realize we live our lives as if everything was permanent, or we hope at least that it is. But are surprised that relationships don't last, peace doesn't last. Things keep changing. So the point is that for the first step is, of course, impermanence. Things change, we're going to die, etc. Very important and very helpful to understanding emptiness. If you fully realize impermanence, they say it's much easier, let's put it that way, to understand emptiness. There's nothing to hold on to. If things are constantly changing, never remaining the same, what solid I that I believe exists is possible. There's just something that's constantly changing. It's never the same. I only focus on what is the same, or what is similar, I should say. It's not actually the same. There's certain aspects of a person that I saw yesterday, for instance, So I still recognize them as the same person. I look at the bits that seem the same, but actually their cells have completely changed. Everything about them has changed. They shed the outer layer of their skin has probably been shed, and if they had a shower, it's all gone. So they still look to us the same, but they're not. So just because they still look the same, we hold on to that similarity and believe that person to be exactly the same person. But they're not. Their thoughts are different. Everything has changed. Similar, but never identical. So that's already a very good lesson in there can't be anything solid and concrete we can call the I. So once you understand that, you then generate both great compassion and the understanding of all sentient beings being impermanent. It seems impossible right now, and it is at this point. Either you focus on all sentient beings and wish them to be free from suffering, etc., or you focus on their impermanence. But with practice, if you alternate between them again and again and again, you can actually focus, for instance, on the impermanence of all sentient beings, hold that mind, and generate a second mind that wishes them to be free from suffering. Both minds are present in parallel at the same time. Difficult to imagine right now, but difficult to imagine you graduated from high school. Well, so you did that. It seems right now maybe impossible, but through practice, all that, everything becomes possible, where a lot becomes possible, and that definitely. So now you have two minds running parallel at the same time. They're constantly changing, they're impermanent. There's nothing solid there, solid, permanent, as we usually perceive them. And you have great compassion for them. That also, the fact that they're impermanent also makes it possible for you great compassion. In other words, it's not unrealistic. Things can change. They do change anyway. So to wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering, well, at least things are changing. So the possibility, right now we believe they will always suffer and they can never free themselves from suffering. But since everything is changing, then there's hope, right? At the very least, we understand, it's possible. Everything is changing. Suffering is changing. And because these causes and conditions that lead to suffering, well, since they can be totally eliminated, which is the next step, it's just a matter of time that sentient beings will be free. So our wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering is far from being unrealistic. But anyway, the point is, the second type of great compassion is great compassion that takes phenomenal reality as its object. What is usually meant with phenomenal reality is impermanence. Yeah, who would have thought? Why not call it impermanence? Why not calling it that, right? It's actually impermanent. Yeah, usually some would say there's also some other things other than emptiness that you should know about other sentient beings. But mainly in the commentaries I talk about phenomenal reality here refers to impermanence. So, great compassion that takes phenomenal reality as its object. But it doesn't take it as its object. Why don't they call it something else? It runs parallel with the mind that takes impermanence as its object. It actually literally doesn't take it as its object. But it's so effective that there is this other mind that runs parallel that it greatly influences great compassion. It influences, it makes it stronger, it makes it more intense, because wisdom enhances emotions. Great compassion is an emotional state, right? So if you have an understanding of reality, your positive emotions will increase. And with the increase of your positive emotions, your wisdom will increase. They assist each other. We are all aware of that phenomenon. But when you think of negative emotions and mistaken wisdom, so a mistaken view of reality, when you have a mistaken view of reality, our negative emotions grow. This person is evil, this person is intrinsically bad. Anger arises, right? If you believe this person doesn't exist inherently like that, and it's not in the nature of their mind to be evil, you cannot be angry with them. Try to be angry thinking they have Buddha nature, it's not in the nature of their mind, they have that pure mind. Try to hold your anger while doing that. Good luck. It's not going to work. When you're angry, right, If someone says to you, well, this person has just saved thousands of people, or they've just found a cure to cancer, you may actually be tempted to say, don't say anything, I'm really angry with them, I don't want to hear that, right? We find ourselves sometimes kind of dwelling in our anger. We don't want to hear anything positive about them because it feels like our anger is justified and we don't want to lose it. But it comes from a wrong perception. A wrong perception of reality increases, or that person is the answer to all my questions. This person, they will bring me lasting happiness, right? When we're attached to someone, we believe our happiness totally depends on that person. We can't be happy without that person. Is that realistic? We were happy before that person. We will be happy again once we're not together. But in that moment, we're convinced somehow that we can't be happy, so attachment arises. If that wasn't there, we couldn't be attached. So you see, that wrong perception of reality enhances these emotions, and these emotions in turn, they strengthen these wrong views. We're so good at holding contradictory views, right? And these are not views that are intellectual. They're not views that we even recognize. I keep stressing that. Don't worry so much about your intellectual wrong views. Worry about your innate ones. For instance, and I keep saying the same thing, my apologies for repeating it. We know beauty lies in the eye of the beholder. We know it's totally subjective. And if someone tells us, I don't like your trousers, we feel offended. They don't like it. They like something else. But we take it personally as if there was some kind of objective beauty, and I just messed it up because I'm not wearing that objective beauty. But it happens to us all the time. I know I could die tomorrow, but it feels like, no, I'm too busy. It feels like I don't have my things in order, I need to admit. If I look into my cupboard, I'm thinking, I hope I'm not going to die tomorrow. Whoever has to clean up, whoa. Right? I know I could die anytime, but I don't feel it. I'm not prepared. Right? I'm not prepared. So, you see, there's this gap between how we look at the world intellectually, how we communicate with others. Oh, I can talk about death for a half an hour, an hour to 5 hours. No problem, I've got all the facts from the text. But the way I feel, or in other words, that innate sense, is different. So you can see that correlation. Wrong view of reality, negative emotion, and they enhance each other. Now, let's go take the positive type. A correct understanding of reality gives rise to very beautiful emotions, positive emotions. Understanding that all sentient beings are impermanent, that really strengthens your great compassion. So if previously you didn't bring the two together, you could have great compassion. Yes, of course, previously you had already an understanding of impermanence to some degree, but now they run parallel. That is much more powerful. They run together. So your great compassion is greatly strengthened. But then strengthen it further. Focus on all sentient beings lacking inherent existence. That takes no reference as its object. The third type. So no reference means no inherent, no objective reference. So instead of focusing on all sentient beings, instead of focusing on all sentient beings lacking inherent existence, being impermanent, you focus on all sentient beings lacking in intrinsic existence, right? And that is really powerful. Emptiness. You realize that sentient beings lack inherent existence, and still they suffer. Conventionally, they're suffering, and conventionally, suffering can be removed. That is the most powerful of all three types. So you see, this is truly the second and third type. Wisdom and great compassion method combined. Not in one mind, that's impossible. That's only possible in Tantra, not possible in the Sutric system, but close enough. One mental continuum with both minds running parallel. They say first you generate the understanding of emptiness, and because of your having previously accustomed to the first type of great compassion, you can then generate that as well and have them run parallel. And then they very strongly influence each other, right? So that is great compassion that takes no reference as its object. Okay. So that was the first term, basically. That's what we discussed. I mean, in more detail. But basically, I wanted to focus on these verses. So just briefly to wrap it up, I have to finish exactly at 6 today, but I also want to give the opportunity to ask questions. If there are no questions, we'll continue. But just to wrap it up, just quickly to say, okay, we talked about first, what are the main causes of the Dharma, of the Buddhas, of all practitioners, of anything to do with Buddhism. Put it in those words. Those are threefold: great compassion, contrite bodhicitta, and the realization of emptiness. And of those, what is the main cause? Great compassion. Great compassion is the root of all of those. So, having learned that, how many types are there? 2 types. The first type of great compassion is great compassion just on its own, that arises in our mental continuum. Wonderful, amazing. But you want to, of course, combine great compassion with wisdom. And so there are 2 further types. One takes an understanding of reality, which is impermanence. It's difficult, but not as difficult as emptiness and not as effective, but nevertheless very important. So you run great compassion in parallel with that. The second type is great compassion that is directly conjoined with or directly sustained by, to use the terminology, by an understanding of the emptiness of sentient beings. That's the third type. And Acharya Chandrakirti is basically saying, I pay homage to that. Teaching us in that way also what it's all about, learning about it, hopefully with the wish to generate it ourselves. Okay. Now that was the first term, basically. Okay. And then, questions. If you have any questions, we've got 15 minutes of questions. I should look into the discussion group. Are they?
Yes.
They are?
In the discussion chat.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, yes. All right. So she already asked it 5 minutes ago, so she was first. All right. So B asks, the 2 parallel minds of understanding impermanence and wishing sentient beings to be free from suffering. How does this work in terms of main mind and mental factors? Since we're often told 2 main mental consciousness cannot exist at the same time. All right. So we are told 2 main minds cannot exist at the same time. Same time. Is that true? Yeah, we're told. It's true. Okay. First of all, main mind and mental factors. That's a really difficult kind of subject. Great compassion is described as a mental factor. Great compassion is a mental factor. Wisdom is a mental factor. I tell you why, it's quite simple. Actually, it's not as complicated as it usually sounds. A main mind, we give the name main mind to a consciousness from the point of view of simply perceiving its object. Right? Just from the point of view of consciousness performing a particular function, most important function, the main function, which is perceiving its object, we call it main mind. Right? So when you say main mind, you're really just talking about the mind from the point of view of perceiving its object. That's like talking about Kumpen, not from the point of view of being a nun, not from the point of view of being German, or from the point of view of anything more specific, from the point of view of her being human. Kumpen, the human being, is like main mind. That's her that's her main function, or being a sentient being. That is what she has in common with all other sentient beings, right? So we could agree on that being her main function, being a sentient being. But then we have Kumpen, the nun. That is like a mental factor. That's more specific. That's a specific function. That's also not always actively there. As in like active, like when she's in deep sleep, she's not like thinking, I'm a nun, right? There's no self-awareness of that and no one else perceives it. Of course, she continues to be a nun, but not active in that way because she's asleep, or doing her work at Tushita, basically doing everything at Tushita. I mean, doing what she does. Well, she's asleep. She's not doing that. She gets rested for the next day. But again, that's a different kind of function, not active in that moment. So similarly, great compassion is a very specific function of a mental consciousness. Mental consciousness, when you talk about the main mind, so let's say you have great compassion. You have great compassion in your continuum. So that great compassion still perceives something. From the point of view of perceiving something, we say there's a main mind. Because perception takes place. There is a main mind. But that's not great compassion, because the function of great compassion is the wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. The main mind wishes that as well, but that's not its main function. We look at it from the point of view of just perceiving its object. Just from that perspective. So I can say, Kunpen, who's actively working right now, is there still the main Kunpen as a sentient being? Yeah, she didn't stop being a sentient being. There's still the main aspect of a sentient being. But now she's combined with the one working, doing her job. So similarly here, with great compassion, there is the main function of the mind, perceive its object, that's always there. But then there's a very specific one, that is great compassion. Now, you could have a different type of mind, which is wisdom. Realizing all sentient beings are impermanent, right? Again, you have a main mind. A mind we call main mind because it's just perceiving its object. But then you also have that wisdom aspect, okay? So, therefore, you have two main minds. The one that accompanies wisdom and the one that accompanies great compassion. And as B is saying, you can't have two. Yeah, but there are some exceptions. Okay, can you have two sense consciousnesses that are main minds? Two eye consciousnesses that are main minds? No. No, you can't. You can't. You can't have two eye consciousnesses, two ear consciousnesses. So here, very clear. Not just because you have two eyes, so have one eye consciousness that sees this part, and one, no, it's one consciousness that sees what both eyes together allow us to see. With a mental consciousness, it's different. You cannot have two the same main mental consciousnesses that are main minds. You cannot have two that are exactly the same running at the same time. That's what it means. But you can have one main mind that accompanies wisdom and one that accompanies great compassion. And B's question is, what are these two main minds? Well, it's like two people working at Tushita. Venerable Kunpen and who else is at Tushita? Raisa. Oh, Venerable, yeah, not Venerable, Raisa. She's a layperson. And there's Kunpen. Okay, so what is the main mind? Let's use the word main mind. In the case of Kunpen, the mental factor is like her working at Tushita. The main mind is her being a sentient being. So Kunpen, the sentient being, is like the main mind. Raisa, who's also working at Tushita, she does different work. So she's a different kind of mental factor. And there's a different kind of sentient being. So it's Raisa, the main human being. So similarly here, you have two consciousnesses. It's like, usually you just have one consciousness, one mental consciousness. But just as a river can split into two, so can our mental consciousness, right? Sense consciousnesses don't do that. But a mental consciousness can actually temporarily split into two. One is just focusing on sentient beings. It is mainly influenced, even the perception aspect is mainly influenced by great compassion. The other one is mainly influenced by wisdom, right? So we talk about the main mind just from the point of view of perceiving, in this case, the impermanence of sentient beings. From that perspective, we call it main mind, okay? But it's actually perceiving all sentient beings simply because, or perceiving the impermanence of sentient beings simply because of that mental factor. So the sentient being Kunpen here, she's the working sentient being because she's working. It's that function of her working that turns the whole person into a working sentient being. Looking at it from the perspective of being a sentient being, what does she do? She's working because of that mental factor, right? And similarly here, with great compassion. Great compassion, it perceives the suffering of sentient beings, right? So from the point of view of perceiving that, we say it's main mind. But why does it perceive the suffering of sentient beings? Because there's great compassion active. It's a little complicated. It's kind of like, why do you make it so difficult? Talking about main minds and mental factors. It's simply because you have that main function that every mind shares, and then you have specific ones. Right? The definition of mind is clear knowing. It knows its object, perceives an object that appears to it is known. That very much describes the main function of the mind. And then everything that's extra is described as mental factor. And some mental factors, there's some functions that are extra, that are also always there, but they're still seen as secondary. Yeah, well, she asked a difficult question, so that was a difficult answer. But I hope it's a little bit clearer. I hope, B, that I answered your question. And if there's anyone else who's got a question. Yes, Rika?
Related to this, are then the isolates mental factors?
Pardon?
Are the isolates mental factors?
The isolates.
Because when Kumpen is working, that's an isolate of Kumpen, no?
But the isolate is permanent. The isolate is permanent. So when I say Kumpen herself, just Kumpen herself in the philosophical context is not Kumpen. Only Kumpen is Kumpen herself, but to say Kumpen herself, it's like this abstract way of saying Kumpen from the point of view of being no one else. That is an abstract, that's permanent. That goes beyond the actual physical presence of Kumpen. So that isolate is a really weird way of looking at reality. It's saying being this and nothing else. Being this and nothing else is an abstract that is not changing moment by moment. Right? So yeah, so the Kumpen, that Kumpenness of being, or Kumpen being this and nothing else, is an abstract we call permanent. And it's only Kumpen who fulfills that. But that Kumpen being that and nothing else is not Kumpen. It's an abstract. It's not a living being. So I know this is so weird, this way of thinking. It's totally mind-made, you know. It's not like you have these isolates walking around you can actually see. It's just for us to understand better that there are things that it actually refers to the same object, but it's not identical. So when I say Kumpen the nun and Kumpen who sits here, that's not identical. The two are not identical. They appear differently to the mind. What is identical with Kumpen the nun who sits here? Kumpen the nun who sits here. So we distinguish between what you point at is the same person, but you can look at her from different aspects. And that doesn't make her identical because to my mind, she appears differently. I say Kumpen who sits here and Kumpen is the nun. And although you know I'm talking about the same person, she appears different to your mind. That's why I say they have different isolates. They appear different to my mind. And so therefore, from that I know they're not identical. The only time I can say they're identical is if I use the same words. Because the moment I use a different word, it appears differently. She appears differently to my mind. If I say kind Kumpen who sits here and Kumpen who sits here, I'm referring to the same person, but she appears differently to my mind. So just to show that they're so different, that it doesn't matter what's there, how someone appears to my mind makes all the difference. To show that, I distinguish, I say the isolate, which is just that. I use that abstract, which makes it permanent since it's that abstract. It's kind of a mind-created abstract that is not something I see there. And since it's that mind-made abstract, it's nothing I can touch. It's not the actual person. So that abstract is therefore permanent. Okay? Yeah, it's complicated. But not impossible to understand. If I understand it, everyone can. That's why I'm here. Yes? Eric? Alan, sorry, I always get it wrong. Okay.
You said great compassion was a mental factor. It's not a main.
Oh, great compassion, a mental factor. Oh, I forgot, Rika, I should repeat her question. So say it again, please, so I can repeat it.
I think you mentioned, maybe I didn't, I tried to concentrate, but I think you said that great compassion is a mental factor and not a main mind.
That's right.
So
Great compassion is a mental factor. It's not a main mind. That's right.
Okay. So a mental factor is, can you say, connected to a main mind? It accompanies the main mind.
A mental factor accompanies a main mind. In other words, to put it in different words, every mental factor always has the function of perceiving its object. It has every mental factor, because it's a mind, it must perceive its object. And so I say there is a mental fact, there is a main mind because there's that main function. So just because every nun who's working also has that main function of being a sentient being, unless she's a robot, but then I wouldn't talk about a nun. Because I know ordained robots so far.
So apparently, if I remember right,
There are 5 omnipresent mental factors. Yeah, there are other functions that are not considered to be the main functions of a mind. They're secondary functions. That's why we don't speak of them as like a main mind. The problem is, I tell you why it's so difficult. We think about them as like different consciousnesses all together. But they're just looking at it from the point of view of a particular function. And if we see it, if we've decided the main function is perception, we call it main mind. And every other function that is not, we call it secondary. But someone could change that, because in and of itself, it's neither this nor that. But conventionally, this is how we explain it. And I really need to stop here now. My apologies, because I have to go back to translate, and I already have a minute left. So let's take a moment to dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated today together to talk about the second important activity, having set our motivation and everything else. So let's think, may it become a cause for us to be able to overcome all our obscurations that are not in the nature of our mind, to attain the fully enlightened state of a Buddha, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of every single sentient being. All right, thank you very much. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you again on Tuesday. And maybe, because there's not that many people, we could easily fit into the other classroom. Trust me, it's a little cooler over there. Monkeys don't make the same. The sound is better as well. So definitely. But next time, just come to this door. If you don't know where the other classroom is, it's just right across. Very easy to find, for those of you who don't know where it is.